What if everything you've ever been told about hard work was a beautiful illusion? A story designed to keep you running, not rising. From the moment you're old enough to lift a pen, a broom, or a hammer, they tell you the same thing. Grind, hustle, sweat. They say if you just work harder, longer, more faithfully, you'll rise. You'll be rewarded. You'll be respected. But look around. Who are the ones actually in power? It's rarely the hardest workers. The men who break their backs every day aren't the ones writing the rules. They're the ones obeying them. They sweat under the sun while someone in the shade signs the checks. The glorification of hard work isn't a virtue. It's a system of control. And here's the truth you were never meant to discover. Hard work isn't dangerous because it doesn't work. It's dangerous because it makes you obedient. Those who work the hardest are often the easiest to control. They move in straight lines. They announce every step. They're visible, predictable, and eventually exhausted. And exhaustion makes you harmless. You don't fear the man who's always tired. You don't worry about the one who can't stop talking about his grind. You overlook him because he's not playing the real game. Niccolo Machiavelli once warned that appearances deceive, that those who seem the most virtuous are often the most cunning. But what if today's greatest deception isn't found in politics, or religion, or money, but in the cult of effort itself? Think back to Renaissance Florence. The most powerful men weren't the ones working in the fields or hammering steel in the forges. They weren't dying on the battlefield out of loyalty or pride. They were the ones who understood one timeless rule. Control doesn't come from labor. It comes from leverage. A prince doesn't rule because he works harder than the peasant. He rules because he sees further. He moves quieter. He thinks sharper. Strategy is not louder than labor, it's just less romantic. And because it's less romantic, the poets never wrote about it. They glorified the worker, not the architect. And that is exactly why the masses worship the worker, while the elite design the system that keeps the worker forever working. Now ask yourself, who benefits from a world that glorifies endless work? Who gains when you're too tired to think? Who profits when you're too loyal to question? When you're too invested in your suffering to notice that it was never your path to freedom? You were told to be proud of your grind. But pride is not power, and fatigue is not virtue. Because the man who never stops moving never realizes he's running in circles. Hard work becomes a treadmill disguised as a staircase, the illusion of progress that keeps you exactly where you started, visible, compliant, and useful. That's the trap. Because the moment you confuse usefulness with power, you've already lost. A lion doesn't become king of the jungle because he hunts all day. He becomes king because he knows when to hunt and when to wait. Because his stillness commands more respect than another's frenzy. The hard worker charges into the problem. The strategist watches the battlefield. And then with one quiet, perfect move, he wins. And yet, we live in a world that hands out trophies for exhaustion. We praise burnout as a badge of honor. We call sleep weakness, rest laziness, silence a flaw. But ask yourself who planted those ideas. Who benefits when you never stop producing but never start commanding? Hard work, when unchecked, becomes a subtle form of self-betrayal. It hides behind the mask of discipline. But often, it's avoidance, a refusal to think deeper, plan sharper, and demand more with fewer moves. There's a reason kings had advisors, not calluses. There's a reason the most feared men in history weren't the loudest ones. They were the ones who moved once and only once when it mattered. They used other people's motion as their weapon. They turned stillness into strategy. So when someone tells you to just work harder, understand that's not advice. That's a command. And it's not meant for a threat. It's meant for a servant. Because the moment you become a threat, the moment you start thinking instead of just doing, they stop applauding your grind and start fearing your silence. There's a sickness among the ambitious, a hidden disease passed down like wisdom. It tells them that effort equals worth, that the man who suffers most somehow deserves the most. But suffering isn't a credential. It's a tax the unstrategic pay for their lack of clarity. The world is full of people who confuse being tired with being useful. They wear exhaustion like armor, believing that if they just outwork everyone, the throne will eventually be handed to them. But thrones aren't given for effort. They're taken through precision, perception, and perfect timing. The man who works 10 times harder often ends up serving the one who thinks 10 times sharper. Picture the gladiator. He sweats, bleeds, and fights with everything he has. The crowd cheers, but who holds real power? Not the man dying for applause. The emperor, the one who watches, decides, and judges. With one motion of his hand, he determines life or death. Not through labor, through leverage. Hard work without strategy is gladiator blood. Dramatic, respected, but disposable. And yet, society conditions you to believe that to suffer is noble, that your worth is measured by how much pain you can endure, that rest is weakness, that silence means you've fallen behind. But hear this clearly, the most powerful men are not the busiest. They are the most deliberate. They don't move faster, they remove friction. They don't compete harder. They change the rules entirely. A Machiavellian mind never asks, "How can I do more?" It asks, "How can I make less feel like more to everyone watching?" That's the difference between the man climbing the ladder and the man who built the ladder and sold it to him. The worker seeks validation. The strategist engineers perception. The worker waits to be chosen. The strategist removes the illusion of choice. So why are we told to worship effort? Why are we so easily seduced by the image of the tireless man, the grinder, the one who never stops? Because he's safe. Because the man who's always busy never has time to study the game. He's too tired to question the system, too loyal to escape it. He becomes a cog honorable. Maybe, but still a cog. And cogs can always be replaced. But you're not here to be reliable. You're here to be feared for your precision. You're not here to serve. You're here to observe, to wait, to strike once, and never need to repeat yourself. This isn't laziness. It's mastery, because one sword drawn with accuracy is deadlier than 1,000 swings in the dark. And yet, that kind of mastery is the very thing the system trains out of you. Schools don't teach it. Workplaces punish it. Parents fear it. Because true power has no blueprint. It can't be industrialized. It can't be measured by hours or tracked in performance reviews. It lives in silence, in the spaces between your moves. The emperor's robe never gets dirty, and that's not luck, it's design. You must choose. Do you want to be admired for your grind or feared for your mind? You can't have both, because the man who chooses admiration will always serve the one who prefers control. History doesn't remember the hardest worker in the room. It remembers the one who changed the room, and you can't change what you're enslaved to. So take a step back, look around. Ask yourself not, how much can I endure, but what game am I actually playing? Because while you're busy proving your effort, someone else is deciding your ceiling. And there comes a moment in every man's life when he realizes this simple truth. He's not tired because he's weak. He's tired because he's been aiming at the wrong target. It's not the weight of the work that breaks you. It's the betrayal of realizing that work was never designed to make you free. You were trained to climb the ladder, but no one told you it was leaning against the wrong wall. You were taught to move faster, but never to question where you were going. You were taught that discipline means endurance, but never that it also means restraint. Real discipline isn't doing more. It's knowing exactly when to stop. The strategist doesn't chase every opportunity. He picks a few, ignores the rest, and sharpens his blade in silence. He doesn't seek credit. He doesn't need validation. He moves quietly until the move matters. This is the art of strategic withholding. Because the man who's always visible, always active, always loud, is the easiest to predict. And the predictable man is the most vulnerable man in any room. You were told to show your progress, but progress shown too early becomes a map for your enemies. You were told to announce your goals, but every announced goal becomes a target, and every target invites resistance. You were told that transparency is strength, but transparency is just exposure, a silent invitation to sabotage. The man who seeks real power doesn't reveal everything. He reveals just enough to shape perception. Machiavelli wrote that, "The wise man does at once what the fool does at last." But let me add this, the wise man often says nothing at all and lets the world wonder what he knows. Mystery isn't decoration. It's defense. It's offense. It's a weapon. You have to master the art of becoming unreadable, because the man who cannot be read cannot be manipulated. He holds the power of confusion. He creates doubt without saying a word. He controls a room without taking a single step forward. He draws others in only to reveal nothing. And that silence, that refusal to explain, becomes more powerful than any speech ever could. It's not charisma that makes kings. It's restraint. Watch what happens when a man walks into a room and says nothing. Watch how the energy shifts. Watch how curiosity spreads. Watch how the silence becomes heavy, commanding. Because when everyone else speaks to prove their worth, the man who waits lets silence do the damage for him. Hard workers speak to prove they belong. Strategists speak only when silence has already won the battle. And in this modern age, the age of noise, of oversharing, overselling, over-explaining, the most terrifying kind of man is the one who doesn't need to explain himself at all. He works, yes, but not for optics, not for applause. He works for position, and position is power not because it's visible, but because it lets you see everything while showing nothing. In chess, the most dangerous piece isn't the one that moves the most. It's the one that hasn't moved yet, the one that's waiting coiled, forgotten, underestimated. When it finally moves, it ends the game. So, when you think about hard work, don't just think about effort. Think about consequence. Is your effort building leverage or feeding someone else's system? Because in every empire, there are workers, and there's one architect. The workers build the palace. The architect owns the blueprint. And when the walls collapse, the world doesn't remember the tired man. It remembers the one who designed the plan. There's a reason the most dangerous men in history left very few words behind. And the ones they did leave were chosen like blades, sharpened, deliberate, unforgettable. Because those who seek real power don't drown in noise. They rise in silence. The modern world has tricked you into believing that you must always prove yourself, that every day is an audition, that every move must be posted, time-stamped, validated. But kings don't audition. Generals don't beg to be seen. Power, when it's real, doesn't explain itself. And yet, the worker is told that visibility is the path to promotion, that if he keeps showing up louder, earlier, harder, someone will finally notice. But understand this clearly. When you are always available, you are always replaceable. When you are always talking, they learn how to predict you. And once they can predict you, they can control you. Machiavelli understood the value of opacity. He knew that the most effective leader is the one whose intentions remain hidden, not because he has none, but because he refuses to reveal them too soon. A leader who talks too much gives his enemies something to aim at, but a silent man becomes a mirror, and no one dares strike a reflection. Let that image sink in. The most powerful man in the room is usually the least understood one, and that's your advantage. Stop trying to convince people of your potential. Stop narrating your every move. Stop giving your enemies a map of your mind. Let them assume. Let them misunderstand. Let them underestimate you. Because underestimation is the best camouflage in existence. The world respects mystery far more than it respects effort. And mystery isn't some rare gift, it's a choice. When you reveal everything, you give away the game. When you speak too much, you become noise. And when you become noise, you lose gravity. A lion doesn't roar to prove he's a lion. He roars once, and the forest remembers for years. The rest of the time, he's silent. Watching. Waiting. Can you do the same? Can you go a week without posting? A month without announcing? Can you train in silence, build in silence, grow in silence, and then appear complete, undeniable, untouchable? Or are you addicted to being seen? Because that addiction, the addiction to visibility, is modern slavery. It traps you in a loop of needing feedback, craving approval, chasing applause. And a man who needs applause can be led. You cannot be free while you need to be noticed. You cannot dominate while you're still begging for credit. And you will never build an empire if your identity depends on being seen grinding. The real game isn't about proving your worth. It's about becoming unavoidable. And that has nothing to do with how hard you work, and everything to do with how rare your presence becomes. There's no scarcity in hard work. Millions do it. Billions live in it. But scarcity exists in stillness, in precision, in the ability to disappear and return only when it matters. Very few people can do that. Be one of them. Because in the end, it's not the man with the calloused hands who commands the fate of kingdoms. It's the man who knows when to vanish and when to return with thunder. There comes a moment when every man who's labored for applause finally realizes the applause means nothing. It doesn't pay him. It doesn't protect him. And it definitely doesn't promote him. It's just a leash disguised as admiration, a leash made of clapping hands. The moment your actions depend on applause, you stop acting and start performing. And performers don't win wars. They entertain the ones who do. That's what you must understand. Hard work has been weaponized against you, romanticized, glorified, sold to you as virtue. But nobility without power is tragedy. It's a story told at your funeral, not a victory written in your lifetime. You are not here to be remembered fondly by those who used you. You are here to win. And to win, you must value something far rarer than effort. Control. Control of time. Control of perception. Control of narrative. Control of outcome. These things do not belong to the hardest worker. They belong to the sharpest manipulator of movement. The man who takes one perfect step while others run in circles. He understands something most never will effort is visible, but leverage is invisible. The ones truly in control aren't the ones sweating. They're the ones who profit from sweat. They're the ones who can shift attention, move resources, bend perception without breaking a sweat themselves. You've been told to respect the man who never stops moving, but Machiavelli would tell you to respect the man who chooses when to move. The one who knows when to disappear, when to speak, when to strike, and when to leave no trace. That's the essence of power. Not chaos, not noise, not endless motion, but measured, deliberate, intentional force. Look at the battlefield. The general doesn't fight. He doesn't swing the sword or carry the armor. He directs. He sees the terrain. Conflict reads the silence before the storm. He knows that force must be precise, or it's wasted. One wrong move, one early attack, and an entire army collapses. The soldier may be brave, tireless, loyal, but wars aren't won by courage alone. They're won by clarity, by the man who moves only when timing is perfect. That's where most men fail. They think if they just keep working harder, someone will notice. Someone will reward them. Someone will hand them the crown. But crowns aren't handed out. They're taken by men who understand the hidden layers of power, by those who don't wait to be chosen because they've already rigged the game. Now think about this. Why is it that the wealthiest, most powerful men in history, the emperors, the moguls, the founders, are obsessed with stillness? Why do they guard their mornings? Why do they disappear into silence, cut people off, avoid noise? Because they understand what noise costs. Focus. And focus is leverage. While the masses chase distractions and dopamine, the powerful build systems that the world will obey. You've been told that to rest is to fall behind. That belief belongs to pawns. The king never rushes. The king doesn't multitask. The king doesn't panic. He waits until every piece has moved, and then makes one move that ends the game. Your obsession with being busy is stealing your sharpness. Your need to always be seen is destroying your mystery. Your addiction to constant motion is the reason you're stuck. The next level of power doesn't require more effort. It requires less noise, fewer moves, stronger moves, and silence the kind that makes others talk just to fill the void you leave. That's how you know you've stepped into a new arena, the one where hard work ends and real power begins. Now you understand hard work isn't evil. It's just incomplete. It's the first stage, the proving ground. But staying there forever, that's the trap, because the world doesn't reward effort. It rewards effect. It doesn't crown the man who tries the most. It crowns the man who changes everything with the least motion possible. The crowd cheers for the fighter who bleeds, but the kingdom belongs to the one who never had to fight at all. And if that makes you uncomfortable, good. That discomfort, that friction is truth breaking through the illusion. It's the last gasp of a lie that's been strangling you since birth. Because deep down, you've always known. You knew something was wrong with the endless grind. You knew something was hollow about the applause. You felt the exhaustion that never led to peace. You knew, but you didn't have the words. Now you do. Hard work without direction is servitude. Hard work without detachment is addiction. Hard work without leverage is enslavement dressed up as virtue. The man who wants to rise must do more than labor. He must disappear from the pattern that controls others. He must step back, watch, learn, wait. And when the time comes, move once cleanly, decisively, like the hand of God sweeping across a chessboard. Because once you taste what it feels like to win without being seen, you'll never go back to begging for attention. You'll stop wanting to be admired. You'll start wanting to be remembered. And that difference, that cold, quiet difference, is what separates the empire builder from the bricklayer. So now the question is yours. Will you keep chasing the pride of labor, or step into the ruthless stillness of the strategist? Will you keep exhausting yourself for temporary applause, or become unreachable, unreadable, untouchable, because the man who cannot be touched cannot be controlled? And the man who cannot be controlled becomes legend. If you've made it this far, it's because something in you already knew this truth. You felt it for years, that quiet sense that all your grinding, all your endless effort, was somehow keeping you stuck in place. That the harder you worked, the more invisible you became. Because society doesn't reward the worker with freedom. It rewards him with more work. Look around, you can see it everywhere. The people who hustle the most rarely have control. They're trapped in loops of effort, too tired to think, too proud to stop. They mistake motion for progress. They mistake exhaustion for excellence. And in doing so, they become the perfect slaves, loyal, predictable, and permanently tired. But you're here because something in you wants to step outside the loop. Because deep down, you know that real strength doesn't come from movement. It comes from restraint. Real power doesn't shout. It waits. It doesn't rush to be seen. It disappears until it can't be ignored. That's what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that, "The wise man does at once what the fool does at last." He wasn't glorifying speed. He was glorifying foresight. The wise man acts once, perfectly, when everyone else is still reacting blindly. He understands that most battles are lost not from weakness, but from impatience. Let's go back to the image of the lion. He doesn't chase every sound in the jungle. He doesn't run after every scent or movement. He waits silent, still, unreadable. When he strikes, it's not effort that kills. It's precision. That's the difference between the worker and the strategist. The worker reacts to every problem. The strategist selects the few that actually matter and ends them permanently. But here's what most people never realize. Restraint feels like weakness at first. When you stop running, when you stop grinding, when you start watching, it feels wrong. You'll feel guilty for resting. You'll feel anxious for waiting, because the system has conditioned you to associate stillness with failure. But that's the illusion that keeps you enslaved. The system doesn't fear the worker. It fears the thinker. Because the thinker doesn't play by rules, he rewrites them. And once you see the game clearly, once you understand how it uses your energy, your loyalty, your time, you stop being a participant. You become a player. And that's when power begins to bend toward you. Understand this. The modern world feeds off your visibility. Every post, every update, every moment of proof you share gives away a piece of your leverage. The more people know about your plans, your mindset, your direction, the easier you are to contain. Transparency feels noble, but in a world built on manipulation, it's just another form of exposure. That's why the most powerful men in history moved like ghosts. They left traces, not trails, hints, not confessions. They never explained themselves. They let the results speak. Their enemies drowned in speculation while they moved in silence. In our age, you're taught to build a personal brand, to stay visible, to document everything. But think about it. What happens when you document your every move? You create a map that others can use against you, and once they can predict you, they can outmaneuver you. Predictability is death to power. Mystery is oxygen. A man who cannot be read forces others to guess, and guessing creates fear. It creates fascination. It makes your silence louder than anyone else's noise. So learn to vanish, train in silence, work in the dark, build something they can't trace. Because when you finally step forward, when you arrive complete, they'll have no idea how you did it. And that is power. Now, let's talk about leverage. Leverage is what separates those who play the game from those who get played by it. Leverage means doing less and gaining more. It means bending systems, not being bent by them. It means knowing that power doesn't come from how hard you work. but from what multiplies your work without effort. A single word from a king moves armies. A single gesture from an emperor decides fates. Not because they work harder, but because they position themselves where every move echoes louder. That's leverage. In your life, leverage might look like this. You stop arguing, you start observing, you stop explaining, you start positioning, you stop proving, you start influencing. Every word, every silence, every move becomes intentional. That's when people start reacting to you instead of ignoring you. That's when the game flips. The truth is, control doesn't require dominance. It requires distance. The more you can detach emotionally, mentally, strategically, the less anyone can use you. Because when you're emotionally invested in being seen, you can be manipulated through validation. But when you no longer care to be understood, when your only goal is effectiveness, nothing can touch you. People will call you cold. They'll say you've changed. Good. That's how you know you're evolving. The old version of you, the one who needed to explain, to please, to prove. That version was manageable. The new one, the one who says less and means more, that version is dangerous. And the dangerous man doesn't need to shout to be heard. His silence already echoes. That's the transition every ambitious person must face. From worker to strategist, from visible to invisible, from noise to silence. Because once you master that, you become untouchable. No one can outwork you because you've stopped competing in that way. No one can outthink you because they can't even see where your mind moves. You've become what every system fears, the untrackable variable. Think about how you've been conditioned since childhood. Show your progress. Work harder. Be a team player. Every phrase that sounds virtuous has one purpose: to keep you compliant. Because obedience, not rebellion, maintains the machine. And nothing is more obedient than a man who believes he's being noble while being used. That's why it's time to shift your identity. You are no longer the worker. You are the observer, the architect, the one who designs moves while others make noise. You will let others chase opportunities. You will wait for alignment. You will let others exhaust themselves for recognition. You will create recognition itself. When people ask what you're doing, you'll smile and say less. Because once you realize that mystery is leverage, silence becomes strategy. And when silence becomes strategy, you become impossible to predict. The moment they can't read you, they can't restrain you. And the moment they can't restrain you, you become something they can't control. That's the evolution of power. That's how you stop working like a pawn and start moving like the hand that moves the board. You must unlearn the addiction to applause. Because applause doesn't equal authority. It's just noise and echo chamber that rewards visibility, not victory. And when you no longer chase applause, your moves start to matter. They become quieter, cleaner, deadlier. Because true dominance isn't about how much you do. It's about how inevitable you become. So from now on, remember this. The world doesn't owe you reward for your labor. It only respects results. And results don't come from effort alone. They come from control. Control of your time. Control of your emotions. Control of your exposure. Control of when and where you strike. That's what separates the exhausted from the effective, the worker from the ruler, the ordinary man from the Machiavellian one. Control. That's the word they never teach you to chase. They tell you to chase dreams, chase money, chase purpose, but not control. Because the moment you understand control, you stop being a gear in their machine. You stop being predictable. You stop being manageable. And that's when the system starts to fear you. The modern world doesn't reward thinkers. It rewards workers, men who never stop moving, never stop proving, never stop grinding. They keep the lights on, the wheels turning, the system alive. They confuse exhaustion with achievement. But what they don't realize is this. Exhaustion is the easiest way to make sure you never rise. Because when you're tired, you don't question. When you're overwhelmed, you obey. And when you're too busy to think, someone else does the thinking for you. That's the unspoken truth. Hard work has been repackaged into obedience. The grind culture is just a clever form of control. And the ones selling it to you, the billionaires, the corporations, the motivational prophets, they don't follow it themselves. They're not grinding, they're directing the grind. Machiavelli saw this pattern centuries ago. He warned that true power never reveals itself through effort. It hides behind perception. Because once people can see your struggle, they can measure you. Once they can measure you, they can predict you. And once they can predict you, they can control you. That's why the man who works silently, who builds quietly, who moves unseen, becomes untouchable. He isn't playing by the rules of visibility. He isn't chasing applause. He's creating consequences. That's what real control looks like. It's not loud. It's not performative. It's invisible until it isn't. Your goal is not to impress. Your goal is to influence without being seen influencing. To shift the energy of a room without speaking a word. To pull strings while others think they're acting freely. That's what separates a strategist from a worker. Let's break it down. Every action you take should serve one of three things: positioning, perception, or precision. Positioning places you where power flows. Perception shapes how others see you, what they assume about you. And precision ensures that every move you make hits harder because you make fewer of them. Most people do the opposite. They act first desperately, impulsively, and then they try to fix how they're perceived afterward. They react, they correct, they apologize. Meanwhile, the strategist never needs to apologize because he never moves until he's already sure of his position. That's what Machiavelli meant when he said, "Never waste a move." Every wasted move reveals uncertainty. Every unnecessary word gives away leverage. Every emotional outburst makes you readable. And the readable man is the easiest to destroy. You must learn to become unreadable, to create pressure without showing effort, to build mystery instead of visibility, to speak less and let others fill the silence with their own assumptions. Because silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. While others rush to prove themselves, you're collecting information. While they show their intentions, you're memorizing patterns. While they tire themselves fighting for attention, you're quietly shaping the conditions of their defeat. Understand this. The more visible you are, the easier you are to control. The more predictable your routine, your reactions, your words, the easier you are to manipulate. But when you cultivate unpredictability, people hesitate. And hesitation is the seed of respect. In a world where everyone is desperate to be seen, the most powerful man is the one who doesn't need to be. His absence becomes presence. His silence becomes echo. His restraint becomes dominance. Think about chess. Every beginner moves constantly chasing opportunities, reacting to pressure, but a master moves less. He studies the board. He lets the opponent exhaust himself. And then with one calm, deliberate motion, he ends the game. That's not luck. That's design. That's control. Now take that principle and apply it to your life. Most people burn themselves out trying to win every small battle, every argument, every comparison, every approval. But the strategist knows you don't win every battle. You win the war. You lose the small ones to gather insight. You let others get loud so they expose themselves. And when the moment arrives, you strike once, so precisely that you never have to strike again. That's what the powerful understand. They don't act from emotion. They act from alignment. They don't move to be noticed. They move to alter the terrain. And when they rest, the world still spins around their influence. That's why stillness is the most terrifying signal in a powerful man. Because everyone else is frantic, moving, chasing, and he's just watching, unbothered, silent. The kind of silence that makes others second-guess everything they thought they knew. That silence is not emptiness, it's pressure. It's a storm waiting behind the curtain. It's the quiet that breaks men before the strike even lands. That's what you must master. Stop oversharing. Stop announcing your plans. Stop explaining your vision to people who can't understand it. Your growth does not need to be witnessed to be real. Your power does not need applause to exist. Every explanation drains your mystery. Every justification weakens your image. Because power is not about proving. It's about positioning. Detach from the addiction to validation. Every time you seek approval, you hand someone your leash. They will pull it when they need to control you, and you will follow, thinking it's guidance. That's how they break ambitious men before they ever rise. You must unlearn that. You must learn to be your own validation, to move with inner certainty so complete that you no longer need the world to agree. That's when you become immovable. Because the man who doesn't seek approval cannot be manipulated. The man who doesn't explain cannot be anticipated. And the man who doesn't fear misunderstanding becomes ungovernable. Let them wonder. Let them gossip. Let them fill the silence with theories. Every word they invent about you adds weight to your myth, because mystery always grows stronger in absence. That's how power sustains itself, not through visibility, but through distance. So, from this point forward, measure your strength not by how tired you are, but by how untouchable you've become. Not by how much you've done, but by how little you need to do to shift reality in your favor. Not by how many know your name, but by how many can't predict your next move. That's the Machiavellian art, to master restraint so completely that your stillness becomes weaponized, to move so rarely that every movement becomes an event, to say so little that every word becomes a command. Because at the highest level, effort is irrelevant. Only effect matters. You were never meant to be the one applauded for your labor. You were meant to be the one whose silence commands the room. You were never meant to chase opportunity. You were meant to create it through leverage, through foresight, through invisible control. That's the final stage of power. It's not about working harder. It's about becoming the man who no longer needs to. The man whose stillness changes everything. The man whose restraint makes others restless. The man whose absence is louder than their presence. And when you reach that level, when you no longer crave noise, attention, or applause, you'll understand what Machiavelli truly meant by mastery. That the throne was never built for the one who worked the most. It was built for the one who learned to wait, to think, to watch, and to strike once perfectly. So remember this: hard work builds the foundation, strategy builds the empire, noise builds the crowd, but silence builds the throne. And if you must choose, always choose the throne, because the world forgets the man who worked the hardest. It remembers the one who worked the smartest, the one who disappeared into silence, watched from the shadows, and returned with one move so flawless that history could only whisper his name with fear and fascination.